Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So I feel like it's still kind of beginning of the year vibes, so I can get away with this video where we're going to be looking at my reading stats and how my reading went in 2021. So I use Storygraph to track all of my reading, and I absolutely love the graphs and the pie charts that they give you in terms of all of the statistics around your reading. And it's where I track my TBR and set all of my reading goals as well. But before we dive into the juicy stats and pie charts, let's cast our minds back to 2020, which was my best reading year in terms of number of books read, like quantity of books. I read 48 books in 2020, and that was the most books I've ever read, and it's the closest that I've ever got to completing the 50 book challenge. And so I thought that as 2021 started in the UK in full lockdown, that this would be the year. This would be the year that I would hit 50 books. And so I set it as my reading goal, but alas, this fetus inside me had other plans. And in 2021, I managed to read 39 books, which I'm still very happy with. But I do think that if it wasn't for the growing fetus, I may have been able to hit that 50 books. But what do I care about more? Definitely this thing and not the book thing. So let's take a look at the breakdown of those 39 books that I read last year. So yes, there we have it. My reading goal was 50 books. I read 39, which was 78% of my goal, and I read 11,547 pages. I've never set a pages goal, which is something that you can do in Storygraph, but that's mostly because when I hear the number 11,000 pages, I'm like, I don't know what that means. I would have no idea what to even set as a pages goal. But I know some people prefer doing that because then it's a bit more reflective of their actual reading rather than quantity of books. But hey, let's take a look at the moods. So my most read moods were emotional, reflective, and funny. And then we got to informative, challenging, and adventurous. And then the smaller little slices are light-hearted, hopeful, tense, sad, mysterious, and dark. So maybe that gives you a bit of a sense of just my general emotional state last year. Ooh, wouldn't it be great if across the year you could see your moods reflected, so you could actually take a look and be like, oh, like in this month I read a lot more funny books, and then suddenly we went into a dark and mysterious phase. That would be cool. Storygraph. Pace. So I mostly read medium pace books, about 2/3, and then fast, and then just 8% slow books. That sounds about right. I'm not really a fan of slow paced books. I like a page turner. And that's maybe reflected in this next thing, which is the page numbers. So the majority of the books that I read, 52%, had less than 300 pages. And then 45% was that middle length, 300 to 499 pages. And then just 3% of the books that I read had over 500 pages, which is just one book. And it was The Host by Stephanie Meyer, apparently. 620 pages. Wow. Yeah, that was a long book. I enjoyed that book. But yeah, long books definitely I find more daunting to read, but I have read lots of really long books in the past. Like I read A Song of Ice and Fire, and when George R.R. Martin finally releases Winds of Winter, I will be reading that. But yeah, those books are hefty, but I don't know, I think I sometimes get into my head about like the reading goal and the number of books read, and so I do prioritize shorter books over longer books because I like the satisfaction of finishing a book. So maybe that's something for me to work on emotionally. The fiction and non-fiction split is like 77% fiction, 23% non-fiction. I quite like that. I definitely prioritized reading a lot more fiction last year because I just needed some stories. I was definitely feeling a bit fatigued from non-fiction reading. All right, genres. So my most read genre was contemporary, so just regular books set in regular times. And then LGBTQIA+. I do wonder if that is like, it has to be a prominent feature, like the main character has to be queer or the themes have to be like specifically about that. I don't know if it's like, oh, if there's a side character or a minor mention of it, then it counts. And that was 10 books. And then I also read 10 books in the romance genre, which is definitely something that I have been getting into in the last couple of years. I just love me a good rom-com, and Hollywood and movies are not hitting the spot for me in terms of the rom-coms that are coming out these days. But the book world, the publishing world, like contemporary romance novels, rom-coms, yes, they are funny and they are saucy. And then my next biggest genres were science fiction, which might just be mostly Becky Chambers and the Wayfarers series, and then young adult, literary, and historical. I read 6 historical books. What are they? What are they? Song of Achilles, Reputation, Kindred, Think of England, Malibu Rising. I guess it's like set in the 70s or 80s. That counts as historical now, I guess. And then The Vanishing Half. That's set over a couple of generations, but I'm pretty sure it's still like contemporary. Or is it not? I can't remember when it was set. And then a whole bunch of other categories I read like 1 or 2 or 3 books in. Format. So mostly read print, 56%. And then the rest of that is split almost evenly between digital and audio. And actually, I will probably be reading a whole lot more digital and audio books this year post-baby, because Dan and I are clearing out the flat, and so I'm not buying any more physical books. I've done a big clear out and I'm not adding any more books to the shelves. And so if I do read anything physical, I either already own it or I'll be getting it from the library, but then everything else will be digital and audio. And then my most read authors are Becky Chambers, that's the Wayfarers series, Talia Hibbert, that's the Brown Sisters romance series, and Casey McQuiston, also romance. Here it is. This is the graph we have been waiting for. I've been waiting for. So in both January and February, I read 6 books. So I was off to a flying start. This is why I thought that this could have been the year where I read 50 books. And then it just kind of slowly decreased throughout the year, probably as like lockdown eased. And then at the end of the year, you can just see the full plummet. So the blue line is books read, and end of August was when I found out I was pregnant, and beginning of September was when I started to feel horrendous. So I read 2 books in September, none in October, and then 2 in November and 2 in December. So yeah, that's where I was at. I watched a lot of films during that time. And then my star ratings. So my average rating was 4.2, which is really good. Like, that's a sign that I'm reading a lot of books that I like. But also my lowest rating that I gave a book was 3 stars. And I don't know whether this is because I'm really good at picking books to read that I know that I'm going to really like, and I don't read a lot of flops like for myself, or I just don't like giving books less than 3 stars because I feel bad. I don't know. I think this is something that I've been grappling with recently, because I'm like, but if I don't like a book, then I should give it an honest review, but then I just feel bad. And I don't know. How do you guys deal with your like star ratings? Are you just brutal? Like, I see a lot of booktubers who are just like, yeah, this gets 1 star from me. And I'm like, how could you do that? But I get it, because like some books just like, you just don't like them, they're not for you. But my biggest rating was 4 stars. I gave 15 books 4 stars. But I do like in Storygraph that you can give like 0.25, 0.5 or 0.75 stars as well. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the star rating system. I think it just makes me anxious. So that was how my reading in 2021 went. And this is now my plan for 2022's reading. So I have mentioned in previous videos, like my goals video and my New Year's resolutions video, that I am picking a whole bunch of books to be my priority books to read before baby is born. So I'm due at the end of April, and I'm really not making any reading plans for the rest of the year. But I love books and I love reading, and I want to get as much good quality reading in before then so that I can kind of like tick a few more books off my TBR, but also just because I'll have the time and space to enjoy these books. So I've already mentioned in a previous video my list of sex and relationships non-fiction books that are priorities for me to read, and whilst I'm not going to read all of them, that is not the plan when it comes to what book I want to read next, when it comes to finishing a book and picking up a new one, like this is the list that I will pick from. But since making that video, I have added 2 more books to that list. The first is The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay, and the other is Rough: How Violence Made Its Way into the Bedroom and What We Can Do About It by Rachel Thompson. And both of these books just have been highly recommended to me, so I did want to add them onto my priorities list. I've no idea which of these books out of those 2 and the other ones on this list that I will get to before April. I'm just going to see what takes my fancy as and when. But I have also now made my list of priority books for fiction and also general non-fiction, as in non-sex and relationships based. So the fiction books that are on my priorities list are Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters series, and I've actually already read this one, so tick, tick, tick. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Was it my favorite out of the 3? I don't know. Chloe Brown, I think, was my least favorite. And then I can't decide between Danny and Eve. I did really like the Eve Brown one. And then the book that I'm currently reading is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This has just come highly recommended. I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I'm still very much near the beginning, but there's an orphanage of magical children, and then there's a man who is like a caseworker or like a social worker, and apparently it's got very found family vibes, which I'm here for. The next 2 books are part of a series, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, and these are like the sequel to the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I'm not particularly interested in reading the Shadow and Bone books, but I loved the TV show, and I was especially drawn to and compelled by the Six of Crows characters and that crew, and these books have also come highly recommended, and so I'm very excited to dive into them. And also I just love me some fantasy, and I feel like it's been a while since I've read any fantasy, but I think that's because fantasy feels like a very big time and emotional commitment. The books are often really long, the series are often really long, and you also just like have to get into like a whole new world as well. But this is just 2 books, so I feel like this is very manageable, and I am ready to make the commitment to the Six of Crows duology. The next book on my list is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I read Kindred last year and I really enjoyed that, and I want to read more Octavia Butler, and this book is one that I've heard a lot of really great things about, and I am very excited to read it. Next up is a book that I know very little about, other than it is in the romance rom-com genre, and a bunch of my patrons in our Discord server have been talking about this book a lot and raving about it, and I just want to join in. I'm getting FOMO from this book, and it is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. No idea what it's about. It's a rom-com. I've been getting really into rom-coms. It comes highly recommended from my patrons, who are a bunch of readers that I very much trust their taste. And then my final fiction book, after I said all of that stuff about fantasy being a very big commitment, is a 50-hour-ish long audiobook, because I've already downloaded the audiobook of it, is Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And this is the 1st book in the Stormlight Archive series. And this actually isn't a priority for me to read before baby is born. I've just like got it queued up, ready for once baby is here, because I've heard that apparently audiobooks are your friend when you have a small child. So this is going to be the thing that I'm just like got in my ears constantly whilst trying to do parenting. But Dan has already read, I think, all of the Stormlight Archive books that are currently out, and he's listened to them all, so I already am familiar with the narrator. Like, he'll listen to it before going to bed, so I'm used to the voice, and also I already know like a bunch of the characters and kind of like some of the plot points in later books, but I'm ready to like actually dive into it myself, like from the beginning, and then Dan and I can actually have like proper in-depth nerdy conversations about this series, because Dan's constantly trying to have these conversations with me, but I'm not quite there. Like, I'm curious, I'm like, oh, interesting, okay, that character's doing that, okay, all right, but I'm ready to like dive in myself and have my own ideas and thoughts about it. And then in my general non-fiction list, there's just 2 books. The first one, already read, tick, 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 and that's Consumed by Aja Barber, and this is all about consumerism and the fashion industry and climate change. And then the second book is The Anthropocene, reviewed by John Green. I've been watching the Vlogbrothers for like over a decade. I've never actually listened to the Anthropocene Reviewed podcast, but I wanted to give the book a go. I'm actually currently listening to this and thoroughly enjoying. The essays are so interesting and funny and thought-provoking, and I don't know, I just love how they're just like giving me little bite-sized pieces of information about all these different things, but then also making me kind of like think about things in different ways and getting a bit more of an insight into John and his life and his thoughts on all of them as well. So there you have it. That was how my reading went in 2021 and how I plan / hope / dream my reading will go in 2022, aka the next few months, and then after April, who knows? But I have set my reading goal this year to 20 books, so we will see. That's like half of what I think I do on average, but if I don't hit that, honestly, not going to be mad. It's fine. But I still like setting a goal, something to work towards, even if we don't really care about hitting it. What are some of the books that you are really excited to read this year? Let me know in the comments. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.